Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to all our delegates today who are joining us from all over the world for our Diet and Health Open Innovation Research Club, a mouthful that we shorten to OIRC, the BBSRC funded initiative that's helping UK food and nutrition businesses collaborate with the UK research base to find innovative, real-life solutions that hope to tackle some of the major diet and health-related challenges that we face. We're so thrilled to have had such a fantastic registration for this webinar, and perhaps that's a testament to the lineup of expert speakers we have with us today. Please do read more about our speakers in their bios and with some of their work and other abstracts of interest in the delegate pack, which you can find using the icons at the top of the auditorium. And just a couple of very quick points before we begin. Again, using your icons, if you would like to submit any questions to the speakers during the presentations, we will pass them on to them after the webinar. Also, if you have any technical difficulties, the Workcast technical team are on board to help, so do just submit these through the question icon. One of the most common tech issues that happens is a loss of sound, and if this does happen, do try refreshing your page, as this may help. You will also see a couple of evaluation polls in the presentations for your feedback. These will pop up, and we're really grateful for your responses to this. Finally, as you can imagine, on this very interesting topic, there is a wealth of information. And so in the event that the webinar might run a little bit over, please be reassured it will be available on demand from your link. So do come back to it if you've missed it or you want to revisit it. And so to begin with our first speaker setting the scene, and he may well be familiar to you. He's a chef, a food developer, a best-selling author, a press columnist and a consultant. And as the Angry Chef, he is a master of wit and thought-provoking communication on pseudoscience and misinformation. We're absolutely delighted that our introductory speaker is Anthony Warner.
Hello, thank you all for joining. My name's Anthony. I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about collaboration and why that's key to healthier, more sustainable food. And obviously there's a strong theme of collaboration today, but this really is like the heart of what I do in my work and the things I'm passionate about. So it's really exciting to be able to talk about it at the start of this event. So my name is Anthony Warner. I am a chef and I used to be a restaurant chef, sort of shouty 1990s restaurant chef, shouting at people in kitchens. But then I moved to work in development for the food industry and moved to a company called Premier Foods at the time, with the biggest food manufacturer in the UK, and spent about 12-13 years working on some of the really iconic British food brands in development. And now I'm a consultant, and I work with a company called New Food Innovation and a spin-out called Fruition. And our work is entirely in this sort of intersect between universities and industry, and bringing sort of academia and industry together. So I get really excited about those sort of projects. I believe that's where the heart of real, genuine food system innovation is. So it's something I'm always interested to talk about. I left Premier Foods because I started writing, and I wrote a blog which became quite well known as the Angry Chef, and I did some writing and wrote for some newspapers and some magazines, and wrote some books about food science. But more recently, I've turned to this consulting area. So I wrote 3 books, and there's a sort of common theme of understanding the misunderstandings around food and around health, and particularly later on around sustainability. And my most recent book there, Ending Hunger, I consider to be sort of I consider it to be the best thing I've written, and probably the most important thing I've written. Unfortunately, the book buying public of Great Britain and the world didn't really agree with that. But I still stand by it as quite an important piece of work, because in researching for that work, I genuinely ended up believing that the issues around food system sustainability are the most important issues facing humanity. And that sounds like a sort of quite extreme statement, but I really think they are. I really think they're things we need to address. The potential that the food system has to do enormous and irreparable damage to the planet, and eventually end up sort of in a position where we won't be able to feed everybody is potentially terrible, and something that really needs addressing very quickly. But I think probably the most interesting thing that I found out when I was researching for the book and spoke to sort of experts and people all over the world about these issues is that that there's really is potential to be able to solve all of these issues. These are not sort of insurmountable problems. As the human population expands, we will reach a point where the population will start to tail off, and it's perfectly possible to create a food system that will feed all those people for the rest of the time of humanity in a sustainable way, which won't do damage to the planet. The only problem is we're not doing that. We're not heading towards that now. We are heading probably further away from that than we ever been. The environmental impact of our food is enormous, and it is increasing, and it is something that we're not doing enough to address. So it is a curious question why we're not doing enough to address that. My belief is that the way to really address it is through innovation. I'm an innovator. I'm someone who's worked in food innovation for a lot of my career, and I genuinely believe that we need better quality, more fundamental innovation in our food systems in order to get to the point that we have a sustainable food system. We are not making the most healthiest and most sustainable foods the most desirable and the things that people want to eat. And without doing that, which I believe we need to do that through innovation, and without doing it, we will never get to a more sustainable food system. We almost run out of nitrogen in the early part of the 20th century. We addressed that through innovation. We almost run out of food in the middle of the 20th century, and we addressed that through the Green Revolution innovation. In order to get to a point where we have a better quality food system, we need proper innovation. But it's not happening fast enough, and it's not happening sort of enough generally in the food system. There are lots of reasons why. I want to talk about a couple of them briefly. Innovation is difficult, and I've worked in R&D departments of lots of big companies and with a lot of these sort of large food giants. And apart from perhaps the very few very biggest companies, most R&D departments do a lot of D and not much R, in that they do a lot of development and they don't do that much research. Because research is difficult, it's long term. Food is a difficult industry to work in. It's fast paced. There's lots going on. Margins are tight. Costs are tight. Restructurings happen all the time. And there's a lot of pressure on research and development departments to meet development briefs. And the people who are charged with doing that sort of longer term research tend to get pulled out and pulled into doing day-to-day development and often just sort of firefighting or meeting briefs to do similar stuff to we're already doing, just slightly different, to get some new products into market or meet the demands of a particular customer. So I always say, and I spend an enormous amount of my time speaking to companies and saying, you need to outsource that research part, preferably to universities or to institutes, or just bring it out of your business so it is ring fenced, and so there are people working on these long term or medium term, so 1, 2, 3, 4-year projects. So you have academics who are doing that work, or students or PhD students working in universities who are not going to get pulled into the development. They're not going to get pulled to the latest sort of cost cutting initiative or pulled in to help out a factory who's lost a few of their development team. They're going to be there doing that long-term research. And the last part of this, the access to facilities, I can't stress this enough. I work in these sort of collaborative projects, and the access to facilities and to expertise within university partners for this sort of longer-term research product with industry is absolutely extraordinary. I work a lot with a couple of UK universities and a couple in Europe, and a project running in a university is going to have access to scanning equipment, to ways of analysing products, and to individuals who can help with complex statistical analysis, and all these sort of things, economists and behavioural scientists, that you're not going to get in any food company. You're going to have access to that if it's needed within academia, and that leads to the genuine big the genuine research breakthroughs and real things happening. They're going to make a difference in the food system, which is going to be big enough to really address those big health and sustainability problems. Another thing that I'm particularly passionate about as well is open innovation. I work on a lot of briefs from large retailers or large food service companies, and we look at large issues that they have, big sort of fundamental problems running across large numbers of products, to make them healthier and to make them more sustainable, and all the problems that they have doing that while still creating food that people are going to want to buy. And we take those problems and we brief them out to a selection of academic partners, to industry experts, to companies working on specific new ingredients, large ingredients companies and small startups, and bring them together into a room to present solutions and talk to each other as well, as well as talking to the people who have briefed out these issues, to talk to other companies and have this sort of network of collaboration between companies and academics and end users, to really understand how to address some of these key food system problems. And collaboration is absolutely key to that, and is the way we're going to solve the big problems we have in our food system. So yeah, industry does need the help from academia. We work on we've created a couple of spin-out startups based on academic research, which are really going to help now, sort of help create sort of more healthier and more sustainable foods. But academia does also need industry. If we're going to solve the solutions, we're going to provide the solutions for food systems. The solutions need to be scalable, they need to be desirable, they need to be accessible, and that's incredibly important. There's a picture there of a loaf of bread, which an unnamed food writer claimed was a healthy option that people should be switching from plant bread to that, because plant bread's unhealthy, and this was the healthier option. This was from a very expensive bakery, which is only available in large cities and costs about £6.50 a loaf. It's not a viable solution to our food system problems, however delicious it might be. It's not something that's going to be scalable, desirable, and accessible to most people. And if you want solutions that are going to reach large numbers of people, enough people to make a genuine difference in our food systems, then working with industry and working with people who know how to build factories and know how to implement genuine innovation throughout sort of serious scale manufacturing, that's exactly what you need. The sort of projects that I'm working on, we're trying to really make a difference to right the way through to agriculture. And unless you're getting things of a genuine scale, then it's not healthy and not sustainable. I can make the healthiest, most sustainable recipe in the world and cook that for you, but if it's not desirable, it's not something people want to eat, and it's not available to cost or available to make it to scale, it's just not a solution to any of the problems we're encountering. That's about all from me. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you for listening. This is really important work, this collaboration. This is where sort of genuine food system change can happen. And so I'm looking forward to hearing from the rest of the speakers during the day and understanding more about some of the work that's going on out there. Thank you all. I've been Anthony Warder, the Angry Chef, and enjoy the rest of your time here today.
Thank you, Anthony, for that fantastic introductory talk and really starting to get us thinking about the importance of collaboration for innovation in health and sustainability. One of the key points from that talk was that any effective solution needs to be desirable, it needs to be what people want, and it needs to be accessible and affordable. And so that brings us to our next speaker of today on the need for increased understanding of consumer dietary behaviour in the real world. And we're thrilled to introduce Professor Jeff Brunstrom, an absolute expert in behavioural nutrition, including fascinating aspects like appetite control and food choices. We're really excited to be working with Jeff, as he's the principal investigator of the Consumer Lab one of the 6 BBSRC-funded OIRC hubs, focusing on better understanding real-world choices and everyday dietary behaviours. So let's hear from Jeff.
So I'd like to thank BNF for inviting me to give this presentation. I'm going to be talking about Consumer Lab, but I'm going to be really focusing on, I guess, the need to take consumers out of the lab to help us to get what I think is a better understanding of real-world consumer behaviour. And I thought I'd start by just making a pretty general point, really, and that is that at least it seems to me that everybody right now seems to be talking about the connection between diet and health. And generally, I think that that's a good thing. It's a good thing that consumers recognise this connection exists, and it exists and is recognised for good reason, because diet clearly plays a very important role in promoting a range of non-communicable diseases, obesity in particular, of course, not just in the UK, but worldwide. Right now, I think everyone seems to be very much focused on UPFs, or ultra-processed foods. And there is lots of discussion about whether or not that's a helpful concept or not. But at the same time, perhaps in focusing on foods that we should be avoiding, we should recognise also that others have been focusing on the kinds of foods that we should be promoting or eating. And indeed, not just for our health, but also perhaps for the health of the planet. And many of you will perhaps recognise this important contribution and publication, the Eat Lancet report, which in different ways outlines the kind of diet, the target that we should be focusing on, that we should be switching to in order to fundamentally address concerns that we might have about obesity, about type 2 diabetes, but also importantly, that address seriously concerns about climate change and what we need to do, how we need to transition our diet if we're to take these issues really very seriously. So on the one hand, we know what kinds of ingredients, components, and sorts of foods that we should be targeting and aiming towards. But I think that look, perhaps what isn't always widely recognised is that we're not simply passive recipients of foods that we find in our environment. We can't simply change foods on the shelves of our supermarkets and assume that people will automatically switch or that they will change their dietary behaviour. Our relationship, I would argue, with food is actually much more complex than that. The foods that end up in our supermarket trolleys are not, believe it or not, determined randomly. The decisions that we make are far from arbitrary. And so what I would argue is that if we're really serious about changing our food environment, we can't do this overnight. Instead, perhaps there's a need to really recognise the complexity of our interactions with food. And to really, I suppose, to help the food industry to really help them to crack the problem of dietary transition. We really need to understand or develop a better understanding of the underlying science behind our dietary behaviour. And in many ways, in relation to this problem, I actually think that the UK already punches well above its weight. Many of you may not realise this, but in the UK has hosted a British feeding and drinking group. This is a large collection, actually, of scientists who have been meeting to talk about and understand dietary behaviour for nearly 50 years. It's actually one of the largest groups of its kind, debating, exchanging ideas around underlying drivers of dietary behaviour. And over the years, we've learned an awful lot about the fundamental nuts and bolts, as it were, of dietary behaviour, how appetite works, impacts, how memory impacts our decisions. And we've also, along the way, learned about some of the important social and cognitive determinants of the amount of food that we consume, our meal size and our diet behaviour more generally. And here, in this mix, I think it's also fair to say that an important and perhaps overlooked discovery and outcome has been this realization that food composition really matters, that there's a relationship between food composition and our behavior. Some of this understanding, a lot of it actually comes from animal studies showing that under controlled conditions, you can expose the gut to a direct infusion of, let's say, a nutrient and combine that with exposure to a novel taste. And over time, we now know that there's signaling from the gut to the brain that can cause over time the animal to learn to adapt and to prefer, let's say, a taste that or flavor that's paired with nutrient over a control substance. Now, this is I think, a very simple, elegant demonstration. It's actually quite easy to demonstrate in rodents. But thinking back to Eat Lancet guidelines, how do we study dietary learning and adaptations in humans in the real world? As you can see, to show the same sort of process operating with real foods, we probably need entirely different methods. Here's to just get us thinking. Here's just one solution that my team have been working on in Bristol. This is a programmable vending machine, which lots of people can access over long periods. Because we can control the composition of the foods that are vended, and we can determine who gets which food, we can actually use this to monitor how composition, the nature of food impacts and changes and determines our preference over time. And so one of the cool features of this approach is that after a vended food has been consumed, the participant then provides immediate feedback on that food using a prompt that they receive on their mobile phone. So that's just one example of how we might want to innovate, in a sense, to understand real world consumer behavior. But of course, there may be many other approaches that we could take here and think about. Some have already started to think about loyalty card data, or perhaps Fitbit type wearable devices, perhaps combined with machine learning, that over time can build up quite a comprehensive pattern and picture of our behavior that could feed into this kind of enterprise. And again, I think that we have lots of expertise in the UK. In fact, the University of Bristol recently hosted a conference bringing together the kinds of experts that I think might be needed. These are experts in the analysis and interpretation of so-called digital footprints. And of course, this concern and interest in taking consumers out of the lab to study and understand their real-world behaviour fits with the broader ambitions of the Consumer Lab Hub, which of course sits alongside 5 other hubs that form the OIRC network. But thinking about our vision and the Consumer Lab Hub, when we set up the hub, we recognised really this, that although in the UK and elsewhere we have lots of experience studying human dietary behaviour, often it comprises research conducted in a university laboratory, often with university students. So we might take student volunteers and ask them to taste or consume food that might have been reformulated, and then assess their reactions, measure their food choice, sensory features of the foods, the hedonic ratings, and so on. And it's on that basis that we've developed our literature and our fundamental understanding thus far. We're really drawing on thousands of observations and papers, perhaps conducted from the 1950s onwards. But of course, the elephant in the room here, when we're thinking about understanding and delivering on Eat Lancet guidelines, is that because these studies are conducted on university campuses, we never really know whether or not our theories and findings apply in the real world, and perhaps more importantly, just how important these theories and findings actually are to consumers when they interact with real food. So our consumer lab is really all about enabling the food industry by providing actionable research. This is research that de-risks product innovation and delivers the kind of evidence that can help us to develop healthier eating habits. To do that, we recognise the need for ecological validity. In other words, the ability to be able to predict consumer behaviour in the real world. We recognise that research is needed that focuses on building capacity to study not just university students, but a range of consumer groups, and importantly, those included in an underrepresented and perhaps marginalised communities. And then finally, our vision is all about fostering partnerships that deliver on best practice, that embrace standards around EDI, but also promote high quality research that embrace the use of open science platforms, data sharing, and so on. So finally, like the other hubs, we have a range of different funding streams open to our community, and you can find out more about our funding and other activities on our website. I'd really just like to end by saying that we want to be as inclusive as possible. We want to hear from you. So if you have any ideas in this space, do talk to us. You can see our email address here. Drop us a line. Importantly, become a hub member, because then you will receive updates about our funding calls, workshops, and training events. Becoming a member is free, and the sign-up process only takes a minute, and you can do this online. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for listening. And if you have any questions about Consumer Lab, then please feel free to contact me directly.
Thank you, Jeff, for your talk and for highlighting an important and perhaps neglected facet of research, that we need to build capacity to better understand underrepresented and marginalised communities. This is essential if we want to tackle inequalities and is urgently needed. Now on to our next speaker, the renowned Professor Philip Calder, a BNF Prize winner, a leader in nutrition who has made an outstanding contribution to the field with a body of internationally recognised research on things like the nutritional modulation of immunity and inflammation, notably on omega-3 fatty acids. We're now so pleased to be working with Philip in his role as PI for the BBSRC OIRC Hub, looking at innovation nutrition solutions for life course health. And so it's an absolute pleasure to introduce Professor Philip Calder.
Today I want to talk to you about why I think collaboration is the key to translating nutrition research to identify real solutions to big problems. First of all, let's think about what the role of nutrition actually is. So fundamentally, the foods we eat and the beverages we drink provide us with nutrients and non-nutrients that play a role in growth and development early in life, in supporting physiological function right across the life course, in helping us maintain defense and be able to repair damage. So these are really physiological, structural and functional roles of nutrition. Of course, on top of that, what we eat has hedonistic attributes and has societal and social and cultural attributes. Of course, those are the things that are really difficult to overcome when we think about behavior change to improve people's diets. But today I'm really thinking about the more physiological aspects of nutrition. We have a need, a demand for nutrients, even if that demand may not be very clearly defined for some nutrients and non-nutrients. And ideally, of course, we need the supply, what we're actually consuming in our diet, to meet the demand. What happens if supply doesn't equal demand? That's what we call malnutrition. And I think when we think about the balance between supply and demand, there are three kinds of malnutrition. So on the left, we have generalized undernutrition, where a person may not be getting enough energy, enough protein, or enough micronutrients. And often those things will happen together. And the cause of that is insufficient food intake. In the middle, we can have what I've called an imbalanced nutrient intake, which results in specific essential nutrient deficiencies. And then on the right, we have excessive energy intake, so energy intake in excess of the need, resulting in overweight and obesity. So these are different types of malnutrition, but of course they coexist in society, they coexist in British society, and in fact, they might coexist within an individual. So an individual could be consuming excess energy, but insufficient micronutrients, for example. So how important is good diet in avoiding ill health? Well, the question that's often asked is the other way round, which is how much illness and how much death does poor diet contribute to? So one of the ways this has been looked at is through disability-adjusted life years. Of course, you can also look at mortality. But these are figures for contributions to morbidity, that's illness, in Western countries. And these are the top 20 causes of illness in Western countries. Of course, the picture is a little bit different between the countries. For example, tobacco smoking, although very important in the UK, has less of an impact than it does in some other Western countries because rates of smoking are low. On the other hand, high body mass index maybe is making a bigger contribution in the UK than in some other Western countries because the prevalence of obesity and overweight is higher. But my point here is that high body mass index features high as a cause of illness. But if we look at the other causes of illness, we see things like diets low in fruit, diets low in nuts and seeds, diets high in sodium, low in vegetables, high in processed meat, low in omega-3 fatty acids, low in fiber, low in whole grains, and low in polyunsaturated fatty acids. So across all Western countries, obesity is third on the list, and 9 of the 19 other important factors are also related to the healthfulness of the diet. And these coloured bars simply indicate the type of illness that is contributed to by those factors. So dark blue is cancer, medium blue is cardiovascular disease, light blue is respiratory disease, and the greens are metabolic disease and musculoskeletal disease. But my key point is that diet is really important in contributing to the health of the population. On top of that, we have some really big challenges that have emerged in the last decades. So firstly, our population is aging. Secondly, we have an inadequate food system. Thirdly, we have what's called the double burden of malnutrition. That's the coexistence of excess calories and insufficient micronutrients within the population, the situation I referred to earlier. We have climate change, and of course, now we have concern in the West about infectious disease and pandemics. Of course, many of these are related to one another. So, for example, the aging population has health issues often related to inadequate diet. Inadequate diet is related to the nature of the food system. And of course, the food system influences our climate, but climate change also influences our ability to produce foods. And then on top of that, infectious disease, I think, is promoted by climate change, and those who are most vulnerable to infectious disease in the population are either the older individuals or those with malnutrition. So all of these big challenges are linked together somehow, I think. So nutrition science will be expected to play a role in overcoming these challenges and contributing to improved population health. So we have to think about how we conduct human nutrition research. And this is a sort of way I think we've traditionally conducted our research. So on the left is actually the science, 3 types of science: discovery science, observational epidemiology, and intervention trials, which I think should all be part of a coordinated approach to whatever the research question is. But that research produces the evidence base, and the evidence base is used to make recommendations, to make policy, and then the recommendations in policy are used by industry, by consumers, and by health professionals. So there's a sort of a chain of activities here linking the science on the left with the end users on the right. And of course, scientists disseminate their findings. They communicate their findings, often in a haphazard way, to industry, to consumers, and to health professionals. But this distance between the research, which I had on the left, and the end users on the right is clearly not ideal for identifying problems or finding solutions, particularly solutions that work. So what we need is closer working relationships among the stakeholders, improved collaboration. We need co-creation of testable solutions, translatable solutions, of research questions, and of the research itself. And to do this, we need improved understanding amongst those stakeholders, improved respect, and improved trust. So a scenario on the left is where scientists have questions, industry have questions, regulators have questions, and consumers have questions, but those questions don't overlap. That seems not to be ideal, and I think that is not the situation we have. We actually have an overlapping of interest, so somewhere between what I show on the left and what I show on the right. But what we want really is what I show on the very right, which is where there's a strong commonality in the questions that are asked and the solutions that are sought by academics, by industry, by regulators, and by consumers. So I think to achieve this, we need new structures and funding. So this could be through targeted calls or collaborative calls from existing public funders, from charities through consumer or patient-led funding initiatives, from industry putting up funds for collaborative research, specific schemes or mechanisms that are already in place, things like the LINK funding schemes, the DRINK scheme, the Innovate UK programs, and then what I'm going to go on and talk about now, which is a new funding scheme, which is the Diet and Health Open Innovation Research Club scheme. So 6 innovation hubs have been established by UKRI, led by BBSRC, and they were created in late 2022, early 2023, and they have a 5-year lifetime. The aim of the hubs is to catalyze via funding early phase research collaboration between academia and industry, and also involving other stakeholders. And this is pre-competitive research. Essentially, it's to bring together industry and academics to do fundamental research that is relevant to both parties. So the strategic areas that BBSRC identified for investment were understanding the interplay between food components and human physiology, improving health and nutrition through biofortification, the biological, social, and psychological determinants of food choice and eating behavior, functional foods and beverages, and understanding how nutrition can be improved across the life course through food and beverages. So after its call, the BBSRC funded 6 of these diet and health innovation hubs. One of them is led by Gary Frost at Imperial College, one by Martin Warren at the Quadram Institute, one by Jeff Brunstrom at University of Bristol, one by Gemma Walton at University of Reading, one by myself at University of Southampton, and one by Karush Ahmadi at University of Surrey. And these are each focusing on different aspects of the diet and health landscape, but actually they're all really about the relationship between foods and beverages, physiology, and improved health. So I think that's an exciting development. So I just want to finish by mentioning one more thing, and that is to fulfill its expected role, nutrition science needs to be part of an interdisciplinary approach. And we tried to capture this in this figure here, where we have nutrition science in the middle, because that's the way we wanted to draw this as nutritionists, but we have other elements around which are really important. So we have behavioral science, we have biological science, we have environmental science, we have citizen involvement, we have data science. What's not on here, which should be, of course, is we need industry input as part of this collaborative interdisciplinary approach to improving nutritional quality in the population as a route for improving population health. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you, Philip, for that valuable insight covering so much. And we'll come back to why collaborative approaches are really exciting in our final talk. But before that, we'll move on to two extraordinary entrepreneurs that have used research science for innovation to look at solutions for healthier, more sustainable food supplies. When we think of a shift to a healthier diet, one of the major dietary challenges and a concern reported by consumers is excess sugar intake. And as we know, sugar reduction forms part of the government strategy to reduce obesity. So let me introduce you to two researchers who have used the science to try and do something innovative in this space. Dr. Tom Simmons, founder and CEO of the Supplant Company, and Dr. Josh Sawyer, co-founder and CEO at Zaya. As we know, there are no silver bullets, but these entrepreneurial scientists may be part of a range of innovative and creative solutions that can support healthier and more sustainable food choices.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for listening. It's great to be here. My name's Tom Simmons. I'm founder and CEO of a company called the Supplant Company. We are a food ingredient company. We are based in Cambridge, up in the Science Park up here. Originally had an academic background, partly here in Cambridge, and so that's how we've arrived where we are. And so, yeah, just very happy to talk today a bit about sort of the genesis of the company, where it came from, how I sort of moved from being an academic to starting the company, and then I'll talk a bit about what we do to give a sort of flavour of where the science has sort of developed into and how it's become a business. But yeah, great to be here, and I'll just dive into a few slides. So a bit about myself. I am I'd say sort of academic by training, so I was actually undergraduate in Leeds, actually, then Edinburgh PhD 2009-2013, so 4 years up in Scotland, and then came down to Cambridge as originally as a postdoc, and then had a couple of fellowships over 2013 to 2017. Partly during that time, also did a course in the business school, a diploma in entrepreneurship in Cambridge. Don't do that program anymore, but they did do back in those times. And throughout that whole period, I was the research that I was engaged in was really it was carbohydrate biochemistry. I was working on plant science, or I was in the plant science department in Leeds, plant science in Edinburgh, the biochemistry department in Cambridge, but we were the one lab in the department doing plant science. It was working on things, academic fields that were sort of related to the applications we do now as a company, so related to the food space. It was all about plants and enzymes and sugars and fibers, but actually the application most of the time in all those places, the application that the work was focused on was really more in sustainability. It was about renewable materials, renewable chemicals, biofuels, and and so when we started the company, we did seed funding in 2018. And sort of the unique take that we have had to the problems that we seek to address really come from taking a field of science, a sort of domain of science that was obviously very related to the food industry, as I said before, sugars and enzymes and carbohydrates and fibers, but was really outside of the understanding of most people conventionally in food science, so taking that body of knowledge and applying it across into the food industry to address sort of well understood and acutely felt but really unsolved problems in the food space. And that's sort of partly the unique thing that we've done. And so it's been like quite a big story, quite a story going from then to here. Certainly when I arrived in Cambridge back in 2013, the big plan was to be a professor. That was the goal. Wanted to do impactful, meaningful inventions and discoveries, and the pivot to being a company was not because of the change in that direction. Still, that's the goal. We want to do impactful, inventive, meaningful technologies, and just a different way of doing it. And so it was sort of big change in career trajectory in many ways, but actually the underlying impulse behind it was sort of the same. So that's a bit about myself and a bit about the company, why we're doing it, and what makes us distinct. So I'll just talk for a couple of minutes, and then just to finish about the specific problem that we seek to address, and how that science applies to it. So the big problem here is sugar reduction. That's what we're focused on, and of course, no doubt many people in the audience are well aware of various different attempts and various active products that are focused on sugar reduction right now on the market. The interesting sort of one that most people are sort of aware when you point it out, but not fully cognizant of until you do so, is that sugar reduction has this major gap in the market. And specifically that gap is mainstream food. So mainstream as opposed to premium products, and food as opposed to beverages. So the anecdote we often use to describe it is, if you think back, so I'm not allowed to use names here, but diet beverages have basically been a functioning reality for mainstream consumers at mainstream price points for 4 decades or more at this point. So 4 decades ago, it was possible for the big beverage brands to make mainstream sugar-free beverages, sold around the world, made lots of money. 40 years later, we've had a whole range of other sugar-free beverages, and certainly in British supermarkets right now, it's quite easy to find sugar-free beverages. And yet to this day, the same thing is not true on basically any other aisle in the supermarket. So it's food, so cookies, cakes, candies, ice creams, etc. Sugar reduction, at least from a mainstream perspective, is basically not possible. And the reason for that is it's just a technical challenge. Replacing sugar in food is just different to in drinks. In drinks, basically sweetness is the sole, by and large, the sole function of sugar. In food, sugar is one aspect, but sugar not only defines the sweetness of a food product, but it also defines whether a bakery dough, for example, will be a cookie or a cake or a croissant or a biscuit. Dictates the physics of food, and it has lots of impacts on economics and how these things need to be made. But that's basically the unsolved problem, and basically can't be solved right now. Our unique approach then is to taking this science that was, as I say, really focused on sustainability in the first instance. We use crop side streams as our raw material, and so these are things like corn cobs, oat hulls, wheat straw, rice straw. Is actually the majority of what's grown on farms around the world. About 2/3 of all the biomass that's grown on every farm is not what the farmer considers the product. Rather, it's the side stream, which is to a large degree used in very low value things, or is wasted. So it's the most abundant stuff produced on farms, and it's also by far the cheapest thing produced on farms. And so using it, the insight to use it comes from this sustainability focused research that was part of my academic background, and it's really the enabler that allows us to address otherwise unsolvable problems. For example, this sugar reduction in food problem, and the sort of the core insight there is the unlock to enable sugar-free food products in the same way as sugar-free beverages is not only, but to a large degree, an economic one. You need a raw material cheaper than sugar if you're really going to go mainstream on sugar reduction in food. There's nothing cheaper than sugar in the food system. This stuff, crop side streams, corn cobs, oat hulls, wheat straw, this is the only stuff that's cheaper. And so you sort of have to use this approach if you really want to make an impact in this space. And that's the sort of unique take that we've had on solving it. And so, yeah, this is, as I say, the company was seed funded in 2018. So right now we are live sales. We have across in the US and in the UK. We have contracts with some of the biggest companies in the world. So, just a few sort of proof points on where that is as a product. So, functions across categories right now. So chocolate cereal, bakery, ice cream, works really well across categories. Also demonstrated across sort of the volume spectrum. So we started initially in triple Michelin star restaurants. So, very, very low volume, very, very high value, all the way through to full scale cereal manufacturing facilities on full industrial scale. So works really well across the board. We've demonstrated the health of what we do, principally in clinical trials, and got some examples here. But you can see an impact on blood sugar when you consume our ingredient versus you consume glucose there, and glucose gives this characteristic sugar spike and sugar crash, and ours basically flatlines. So really is good on blood sugar, and of course that has broad effects on calories, etc. And then sustainability, and we've done a lot of work to validate the sustainability of the process at scale, and so less carbon emissions, much less water use, and almost no land used to make the ingredient. Ultimately, in the final calculation, it's that land story that really drives the emissions impact way beyond what the 45% indicates there, because the number one impact on the climate of almost all crops really tends to be deforestation, not the actual process emissions, and so really massive potential impact on carbon emissions, both from this ingredient as well as the second ingredient that we have also live right now. So yeah, so that's a bit of a summary about what we do and why we think we're special, why we are special, and yeah, it's been really great to walk you through the story of what we did, and yeah, I hope it was useful. So thank you.
Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning into my presentation today on responding to health and sustainability challenges with creative solutions. To introduce ourselves briefly, we're Zaya, and we use the power of enzymes to change how our bodies use food. And I'll get on to how we do that in a couple of slides, and how we can use enzymes to tackle the problem of sugar overconsumption. But first, here's a little bit of our backstory. My co-founder Niels and I met at Oxford whilst we were doing our PhDs. We saw how bright ideas could get stuck in labs, and we wanted to translate science out of the lab to have an impact on the consumer. Impact that could be everyday and meaningful, and what could be more everyday and meaningful than what we put in our mouths to eat. So we took some time to brainstorm ideas for a brand new startup. And during that brainstorm, we realized that nutrition is not just about what we put in our mouths, it's also about what our body does with it. In other words, it's less true to say we are what we eat, and more accurate to say we are what we metabolize. With our background in bioscience, we knew about the role of enzymes and how they break down food in our body, and we were inspired with their transformative powers, how they help propel reactions and enable the absorption of critical nutrients in our diet. So we thought, why not use the power of natural enzymes to make food healthier at the point of digestion? And perhaps can we take this approach to tackle one of the hardest nutritional challenges of them all, the problem of sugar overconsumption? I think we can all agree that consumers are more than concerned with how much sugar is in their food. The majority of them are trying to avoid or cut down on sugar in their diet. However, the clear tension is that sugar makes food delicious, where there is a need, in some sense, to have sugar for an enjoyable consumption occasion, where 90% of consumers say that taste is their top purchase motivator. And when we spoke to consumers in our own research, many of them expressed a dissatisfaction in the low sugar, the low calorie, better for you varieties of their favorite brands. On the other side of the coin, for the industry, removing sugar from food and replacing it with alternatives is no easy feat. Sugar adds a lot in terms of taste, texture to food, and so replacing sugar requires much potential R&D investment on behalf of the manufacturer. On top of this, reformulating the food with substitutes can result in a product that doesn't quite taste the same as it once did. This means that the better for you variety may not quite get the traction it deserves in the marketplace. So this presents us with a key question that we want to answer today. How then can you reduce sugar in a food product without replacing the sugar in the food itself? So this is the technology I want to present to you that answers that question. This is Convero, our enzyme ingredient that converts 30% of sugar into fiber after eating. Convero will be inactive in the food product itself and then become active after you've eaten the food. And because Convero is highly functional, only a micro quantity of this naturally derived enzyme is required. And therefore, our approach does not affect the taste and texture of foods. Therefore, Convero can help retain preferred taste profiles while improving nutrition. We want to help equip the industry with a new way of improving nutrition in foods by giving them the option to move from recipe reformulation to biological transformation. Enzymes like Convero can improve the health of foods after we eat them, during digestion, by turning sugar into healthy fiber, giving consumers more options to allow them to make easier and healthier choices. Ultimately, our aim is to empower brands to make better for you varieties that more easily appeal to mainstream target audiences. With Convero, this will drastically increase the number of people benefiting from reduced sugar and increased fiber in their diet. Therefore, we believe that we can use these microenzymes to empower nutritional shifts that can ripple into macro impact for individuals and for society, resulting in better and more accessible nutrition for everyone. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for your attention. If you'd like to contact me or find out more information, you can jump on our website. You can find us at www.zaya.co, or email me directly at joshua@zaya.co, or you can find us on LinkedIn. Thank you so very much for your attention.
Thank you so much to Tom and Josh. How inspiring to listen to passionate scientists and entrepreneurs working across disciplines, looking to help shape and change the future food system. And so for the final few minutes of this webinar, I want to just try and draw some of the themes together. You will see the title, A Ray of Optimism, as perhaps in these bleak times, the presentations add a glimmer of optimism and positivity. But let me first acknowledge the brilliant team that I work with in the Nutrition Intelligence team at the Foundation, with a particular thanks to our director, Sarah Stanner, and to Sarah Coe, who has been amazing in coordinating the webinar. So a big thank you. So, it is a bit grim. Globally, we have the triple burden of overweight and obesity, undernutrition and micronutrient deficiencies, and poor planetary health, as described by Professor Philip Corder in his talk. And alongside these urgent needs, we have somewhat of a policy inertia and a sense of distrust in nutrition science. Yet we know that access to healthy, sustainable diets are fundamental for a healthy population and planet. But we're not meeting this, and strikingly, less than 1% of the population in the UK are meeting all of the dietary guidelines. And to add more to the gloom, there is a stark correlation between deprivation, weight, and diet-related ill health, and the gap is widening. This diagram from the National Food Strategy Evidence Base uses public health outcome data and elegantly demonstrates that most diet-related health outcomes fall below the line of equality. What does that mean? Well, in other words, health outcomes for those in the most deprived area of England are worse than for people in the most affluent areas. And this was reflected in Professor Jeff Brandstrom's talk when he stressed the need to consider the marginalised communities in our research, and this is very important. So how do we tackle very complex issues with all the actors, activities and outcomes involved across the food chain in processing and procurement, manufacturing, catering, retail and consumption? Well, we know we cannot change diet solely through dietary advice and guidelines. We really do need a transformation of the food environment. And we need to unite. We need to unite the food and health facing aspects with new approaches and business models focused on environmental sustainability, on equality, and on healthy nutrition. We need coordinated action and integrative approaches across disciplines, across clinical, behavioural, social, economic, environmental, population sciences, across policy and global health. The food and nutrition industry is part of the solution. They're absolutely key to ensuring research advances are translated at scale into healthier products or improved nutritional support. But it's so important that evidence sits right at the heart. And as illustrated on the diagram on the right-hand side, research needs to inform, but yet is informed by policy and regulation. It needs to consider and respond to dietary habits and preferences, and needs to provide evidence to inform reformulation and to incorporate industry learnings and experiences to inform the research. So they're all interrelated and bi-directional relationships, and we need to work together, but absolutely keep the nutrition evidence at the centre. Now, a collaborative research approach for innovation is increasingly recognised and has in fact been advocated by research councils and think tanks, as illustrated here on the right-hand side by groups like Nesta and the National Food Strategy. And this has been happening to some degree. Drink, for example, was a research council industry collaboration that invested in the UK research base and awarded grants for projects that were designing foods and increasing understanding and the knowledge of foods to maintain and improve health. And importantly, also supported increasing improved skill set in the nutrition-related research community. And as coordinators, of course, we have to mention OIRC. This initiative is intended to catalyse collaboration to address key challenges and stimulate and strengthen collaborative research partnerships, helping to enable effective translation, build capacity and capability, provide thought leadership from really world-class scientists, and develop the skills and talents of early career researchers and of industry scientists. But although industry plays a vital role in translating research, this role is rightly subject to scrutiny. As we know, the involvement of industry has been subject to some debate, but whilst collaborations may have challenges, this absolutely does not mean that they're not important. But perhaps the question is, how can we benefit from such collaborations so the research can deliver with impact? Many have advocated that an agreed code of practice between research and industry could help ensure that the independence of research is protected while the role of industry is optimised. And framework guidelines for structuring the management and conduct of such nutrition-related research have been published. And do read more about this in Innovate UK's Dr. Stella Peace's latest editorial in Nutrition Bulletin, which is absolutely hot off the press. These resources include things like FORK for researchers from the MRC Epidemiology Unit at Cambridge, the EU Code of Practice, and guidelines from the Institute for the Advancement of Food and Nutrition Science. And here are some illustrations of these. I don't have time today to go through them, but there are some different approaches, and these include the sets of recommendations, or guiding principles, or toolkits that look at assessment, governance and communication. But what they all do is they endeavour to provide a framework for practice. But it's really important to remember that bias can happen in nutrition research irrespective of the funding source. And it's been advocated that more rigorous assessment and a standardised, recognised approach to assess the certainty of the evidence could help to identify plausible results and to address some of the criticism that has been levied at nutrition studies and dietary guidelines. And groups like FENS are really working hard and collaboratively to improve our trust in nutrition science, and they're looking to develop improvements and standards that will help to minimise bias, to promote the quality and rigour that we need, and hope that this will help to counter misinformation, sensationalism or exaggeration that is so prevalent in nutrition today. And so to end, that perhaps there really is a ray of optimism and we can leave this afternoon on a positive note. Our speakers have outlined how new research funding opportunities for transdisciplinary collaborations can be of benefit. They can support new research insight, they can harness existing knowledge in many disciplines, and they can allow the necessary upskilling of researchers to be forward-thinking, creative innovators of tomorrow and allow effective implementation. And in fact, we've already seen some benefit of such collaborations, for example, from the drink research. And this includes that vitamin D3 may be of greater benefit than D2, and the impact that this can have on the choice of fortificants used in our food supplies. We have also seen a real increase in plant bioactive understanding and of the understanding of probiotics. So I'd like to finish now by really reiterating that a combined approach can drive and accelerate innovation and allow collective influence that will yield true impact. The research councils can act as independent arbiters and can help ensure that our research excellence is kept, but we do need sustained and substantial funding for interdisciplinary collaboration, and we need open frameworks for funding decisions. We need to capitalise on the immense potential of the expertise and resources in the UK, both public and private, and to reduce the total burden of and the inequalities in diet-related ill health. Yes, for sure there are barriers, but we should take to look at our responsibility and action as a collective and join forces as stakeholders, because together we can find solutions. Thanks very much for listening. So that now concludes our webinar presentations for this afternoon. Before you go though, it's the evaluation plea. Your opinion really is important to us, and we would be most grateful if you could answer the quick poll questions on your screen now. And also to complete the survey you will be redirected to by Workcast. And so to wrap up, we certainly can't end this afternoon without some heartfelt acknowledgements. With many thanks to our excellent speakers, to Anthony Warner, Professor Jeff Brunstrom, Professor Philip Calder, and to Dr. Tom Simmons, CEO of Supplant, and Josh Sawyer, CEO of Zaya, and to our colleagues at BBSRC. And of course, our thanks to you all for listening. We do hope you enjoyed it and found it informative. You can return to this webinar using your link or on demand from the British Nutrition Foundation and OIRC websites. You can also download a certificate of attendance from the resource section of the auditorium if it should be of interest. And don't forget, do join the OIRC hubs. You can access them directly or go through the OIRC website, www.oirc.org.uk. It may be the start of a beautiful collaboration for public good. Thank you again for joining us for this webinar.